All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Holly Regan. I'm a journalist who specializes in stories about underrepresented people in food and craft beer. We've heard from some great speakers over the past few days about diversity and inclusion. Today, I'm going to talk about a group that often gets overlooked in these kinds of discussions. That's the LGBTQIA+ community. So as a queer non-binary person, this topic is very close to my heart. I'm actually writing a story about it right now for Good Beer Hunting. They publish some of the best journalism out there on craft beer, so if you don't already follow them, definitely check them out. And keep an eye out for this story, which should publish maybe sometime next month. So as part of this story, I'm running a survey about diversity and inclusion in the industry, asking craft beer workers about their experience. I'm trying to collect responses from as many people as possible in all sectors of the industry, everywhere in the country. So if you haven't taken that survey yet, please do so now. The link is in the video description below, and we'll come back to that survey later. But first, let me tell you a little bit about how this project got started. So, by now, one thing has been made abundantly clear. The craft beer industry is not diverse. This conversation really gathered steam when the Brewers Association released the results of its first diversity survey in 2019 and found some pretty abysmal data. The bottom line, almost 90% of brewers and brewery owners are white, and most owners and workers are male. So recently, I was researching another beer story, and I needed some statistics. I already had the BA data about racial and gender representation on hand, but I realized I didn't have any information about LGBTQ+ representation. I figured I must have just missed it the first time, so I went back to my source. And to my surprise, I didn't see any information. I thought surely it must be there, so I went and downloaded the raw data from the BA survey itself. And it wasn't there either. Not only were there no answers, the survey didn't even ask the questions. So at first I was confused, and then I got kind of angry. Like, they didn't even think this was worth asking about. You know, didn't they want to know how many LGBTQIA+ people work in craft beer? I dug deeper beyond the BA survey, but nowhere online could I find any comprehensive data on queer workers, and there wasn't anything about consumers either. It was like we didn't even exist. Queer erasure. Unfortunately, this is a problem that's been going on for centuries in America and around the world. It's when LGBTQIA+ people, or at least their identities, are removed from the public eye and the national dialogue, as if we were never even there. And it happens all the time. So now let's do a little experiment. I want you to close your eyes. Now, picture the face of a craft brewer. What do you see? What does a customer look like? Okay, now open your eyes. Did the first image that came to your mind look like this? Okay, sorry, maybe you're more progressive. Maybe it looked more like this. I'm kidding, but I'm not. This is the stereotype that persists across America in media and in marketing, in the hearts and minds of many consumers, and even among those who work in the industry. And that's because, unfortunately, there's a lot of evidence to back it up. That's what the face of craft beer looks like in a lot of tap rooms and brew houses right now. But not in all of them, because craft beer also looks like this. So why don't we think of these faces when we think of craft beer? That's what we're going to explore. Part of it is because queerness isn't always something you can see. How many of you looked at those first images and assumed they were all straight? There's no way to know the sexual orientation or gender identification of any of these people just by looking at them. So in some ways, this compounds the diversity problem. It's hard to know even anecdotally how many queer people there are in the industry, and it's harder still for them to find each other. So let's get back to that survey. Since there wasn't any data on queer craft beer workers, I decided I needed to go and find it. First, I talked to Dr. J. Nicole Jackson Beckham, the Brewery Association's diversity ambassador, and I asked her why this information wasn't gathered in their survey. She said it was because until the Supreme Court decision just a few months ago, it was still technically legal to fire someone based on their sexual orientation or gender identity, and they didn't want to put employers in the position of having to ask about this. So that's a whole other sad thing. So I decided to design my own survey, collecting information from craft beer professionals across all sectors of the industry. I included questions about sexual orientation and gender identity, as well as free answer questions about whether or not the industry is diverse and inclusive. Again, that survey is still open, and I need to hear from as many of you out there as possible to get the most representative data. So in case you missed it at the beginning, the link to that survey is in the description below. I've also got it here on the screen. So if you haven't taken it yet, please do so. As long as you work in the craft beer industry, that's open to everyone, regardless of background, anywhere in America. I don't even mind if you go and take it right now while I'm talking. So far, I've collected data from over 330 respondents. Today, I'm going to share those preliminary findings, and the final results will be revealed in that upcoming article that I'm writing. Before we dive in, I'm going to go over some terminology. You may have noticed that I use the terms queer, LGBTQ+, and LGBTQIA+, somewhat interchangeably. While everyone in the community has their own way of using these terms, this is the shorthand I've chosen to refer to everyone under our whole beautiful umbrella. My intention is to be as inclusive as possible. In case anyone isn't familiar, the acronym LGBTQIA+ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual. The plus represents all of the infinite expressions along the spectrum of gender identification and sexual orientation that a person might gravitate towards in their lifetime. This includes two-spirit, polyamorous, non-binary, genderqueer, transfemme, transmasculine. In fact, there are so many things included in that plus that I think it would be a lot easier if we identified people based on whether or not they were straight, but that's another discussion. Non-binary or genderqueer is how I identify. That refers to those of us who resonate with a whole range of gender identities rather than just the binary male or female. Another term you'll hear me use is cis-het. This refers to cisgendered, meaning a person who identifies with the gender they were assigned at birth, and heterosexual. Of course, we can't have a conversation about queer representation without also talking about race and gender. This is what is referred to as intersectionality. Again, just for anyone who's not familiar, the definition of that is the advantages and disadvantages that are felt by people due to the interconnected nature of social categories such as race, class, gender identity, and sexual orientation. The obstacles queer people face are exponentially compounded when that person is also part of another underrepresented group. And that's because the industry is dominated not just by straight people, but especially by straight white men who identify with the gender they were assigned to at birth. I refer you once again to the bearded bros. Ask craft beer workers whether the industry is inclusive, and many of them will tell you, yeah, beer's for everybody. That's how a lot of people perceive the industry. It's the image it portrays. And if you're a cishet white male, then that's probably how you experience it. But if you fall into any other category, you might be having a different experience. Inclusion means that people from a whole broad range of backgrounds feel welcome in a given environment. Diversity reflects whether or not those people are actually there. My survey respondents agree that the industry is not a diverse place. What's interesting, though, is that a fair number of them do think the industry is inclusive. But you can't have one without the other. If all people really were welcome, if beer really was for everybody, then we would see more people from different backgrounds on both sides of the bar. If the industry really was inclusive, then it would also be more diverse. Here's just a few of the hundreds of comments I received from survey respondents about the lack of diversity and inclusion for craft beer workers. What they show is that, on the whole, toxic masculinity, bro culture, and elitist attitudes are still running rampant across all sectors. Among customers and coworkers, from management to media, this creates a self-perpetuating problem of exclusion and homogeneity. A lot of respondents mention an insider culture among both workers and customers. They talk about breweries that only hire their friends, being unable to get a job without previous experience, and ignorant assumptions about who makes and enjoys beer. This blocks new people from entering and enjoying the industry and reinforces the status quo, which is one where people who identify as queer already feel unwelcome a lot of the time. The good news is that, for the most part, craft beer wants to be different. Many respondents expressed a desire to see more diverse faces and noted that things seem to be improving, even though there is still a very long way to go. Of course, a lot of the respondents who think things are better are cishet white males, but many of them at least realize that they're in a position of privilege and called this out in their survey responses. So that self-awareness is a starting point for change. Looking first at the demographics for all survey respondents, regardless of background, the largest number work in production, with brewers as the biggest subcategory. The second largest number are owners. The vast majority of all respondents are cis-het and white, with male and female roughly split. Now, I want to note that while gender diversity is definitely improving in the industry, this data isn't necessarily representative of the industry as a whole, but rather is more reflective of respondents' geography. So far, the vast majority of respondents are from Washington State, followed by Colorado and then California. Since I'm still collecting results, the data is, somewhat skewed because I live in Washington State and I have a bigger network here, so more people from my state have responded so far. And that's why I need all of you to take the survey. So please go ahead and do that. These states are home to geographic bubbles where people say the industry tends to feel more inclusive. These are bubbles like Seattle, San Francisco, and Denver. However, some people say that inclusivity depends more on the individual brewery, and some people have had bad experiences even in progressive places. Others say that inclusivity depends more on urbanity. If you're in a major city, even within a more conservative state, some people say there tends to be a more welcoming community. Durham, North Carolina was often mentioned as an example. So now we're going to look at the data for LGBTQIA+ people specifically. So the majority of these respondents also work in production, with brewers as the largest segment, which I find encouraging. However, looking at the data for queer people, the second largest category isn't owners, it's service, including both staff and managers. Not surprisingly, the vast majority of respondents are white. However, significant proportions identify as Latinx or Hispanic, and Black or African American. Again, as with the general population, most respondents are from Washington State, but here, California is in second place and then Colorado. Same disclaimer applies. Click that survey link below. The largest number of LGBTQIA+ respondents identify as bisexual. Tied for second place are those who identify as lesbian or queer, followed by pansexual. That's someone attracted to all genders, in case you're not familiar with the term. The majority of LGBTQIA+ people who took the survey identify as female, as well as cisgender. 12% do not identify with the gender they were assigned at birth, meaning they identify somewhere along the spectrum of transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming. 3% specifically identify as trans femme or transmasculine. So here's the important takeaway. The fact that there are more cisgendered lesbian, queer, and bisexual women represented than either trans women or cisgender, gay, queer, or bisexual men reflects some persistent stereotypes about who belongs in the industry. According to both survey respondents and my interviews, the more masculine you present, the more you tend to fit in. In fact, female-identifying queer respondents overwhelmingly say that of all the barriers they face, being a woman is the biggest one. So that brings us back to intersectionality. Queer people already face barriers and discrimination, but they face even more of them if they're also a woman or a person of color. And this is especially true for the trans community. Transphobia is still sickeningly common in many places, and many trans people have to live each day with threats of violence. At least 30 transgender or gender nonconforming people have been murdered in 2020 alone, the majority of whom are also women of color. While there are exceptions, many LGBTQIA+ people who took my survey have experienced discrimination, queerphobia, or transphobia from colleagues, and especially from customers. So one issue is that there aren't enough queer people working in craft beer in the first place. Another is that those who are there often don't feel comfortable self-identifying. This creates a self-perpetuating problem. If you don't see other people like you working and hanging out in breweries and tap rooms, then you're going to assume you're not welcome. You first have to see yourself in an industry to believe that you can succeed. Some LGBTQIA+ people in the industry, despite the threat of consequences, do make a point to be visible, so others will see that there is a place for craft beer. Regan is the head brewster at Bosque Brewing in Woodinville, Washington, a suburb of Seattle. and she makes a point to be visible to help inspire other trans brewers and show them they belong. Brian Vandenberg is co-owner of Red Bear Brewing Company, the only 100% gay-owned brewery in Washington, D.C. And he says that while they don't define themselves as a gay brewery, they definitely aren't shy about their identities. And we'll see some examples of that in a moment. Julie Verratti and Emily Bruno are a wife and wife team who, along with brother-in-law Jeff Ramirez, who is straight, co-founded Denizens Brewing Company. It's the only brewery in Maryland that's both queer and women-owned. With a background in political organizing, they've been actively involved in LGBTQ plus advocacy in their new role as well. All right, this part could be a whole other talk in itself, but let's talk briefly about set and setting. As you may know, the right set and setting can make the difference between a bad trip and a life-changing experience. The following things all play a role in how welcome LGBTQIA plus people feel in a brewery or bar, whether they're a customer or a worker. The physical space, the atmosphere, the staff, the crowd, the community, and the culture. Whether they know it or not, breweries and bars are sending signals through things like the decor, seating, signage, and even tap handles. Having all-gender restrooms sends a message. Think about the music you choose and the kind of tone it sets. You create a certain atmosphere through colors and lighting too. So here we've got some examples of queer-friendly breweries. Flying the pride flag or using welcoming outdoor signage also denotes a safe space. I know that personally, when I see these signals at a brewery, I instantly feel at home. So on the left here is Stoop Brewing, one of my favorite breweries here in Seattle. Two of their three owners are women, one of whom is also queer, and then that's Denizens Brewing Company that we mentioned before on the other side. Of course, the most important message that you send is through the people who occupy your space. And here, owners need to be proactive. Can't just sit back and expect people who aren't already visiting or applying for jobs to come to you. Owners, managers, and association leaders need to approach LGBTQIA+ organizations and people, let them lead, and demonstrate a real commitment. So one good way to do this is through collaboration brews with queer-owned breweries and organizations. The Black is Beautiful initiative is a great example of a collaboration that's been really successful, and many respondents said they'd like to see something similar to that for the queer community. So I also don't want to give the impression that the answer is just getting straight owners to reach out to and hire more queer people. We also need to see more queer people empowered and having the resources to assume positions of leadership. That means creating opportunities for learning, training, and professional development. For example, Marikita Reese, brewer at Stoop Brewing in Fishkill, New York, worked with her brewery to create the Open Waters internship, which is a paid internship for underrepresented people. We also need more queer representation in associations. Rachel Engel, for example, is running for the Brewers Association Board of Directors. And many people that I spoke to also want there to be a queer-focused group like the Pink Boots Society, dedicated for that community. Events are another great way to bring the community together while supporting queer causes. Red Bear Brewing has hosted queer-friendly events such as drag bingo and drag trivia since the beginning, partnering with LGBTQIA+ organizations to raise some money and awareness for them. These are wildly successful events that often result in lines out the door. They're now doing drag livery, where to-go orders are delivered by a drag queen with an optional 2 to 3 minute performance. And I'm super sad that's not in my state because I would love to do that. Temescal Brewing in San Francisco, they have a cishet owner, but their operations and events manager, Teresa Bale, is a queer woman. And they host Queer First Fridays, which is a monthly party coinciding with the neighborhood art walk. It's aimed at the LGBTQIA+ community, but it's open to everyone and draws huge crowds of all ages and backgrounds. So they're currently looking at bringing back a socially distanced version of this, complete with taped-off dance circles. Of course, at the end of the day, it's all about the beer, right? Your beer sends a message too. Offering a variety of styles and strengths and including non-beer options can help make newcomers feel more welcome and encourage a more diverse crowd, including friends and partners of brewery patrons. So the names, this also includes the names of beers. Red Bear has a Keller beer called Dungeons and Drag Queens. At Bosque, Rachel created the Turf Tears IPA. On the other end of the spectrum, There are names such as the leg spreader ESB, the polygamy porter, or the chunky gal amber. Yeah, just don't do that. Like the names, cans and labels make statements too. Sloop Brewing's Super Soft IPA features a cute and approachable can design. 10 Miles People Power Beer includes messages like Black Trans Lives Matter right on label. Many breweries, at least those in our geographic bubbles, release an annual Pride beer to coincide with Pride Month. Queer people have mixed feelings about this. Some people see it as patronizing at best and exploitative at worst. So if you're going to make a Pride beer, don't do it because you think you're supposed to. Do it because you actually care about the community. Get queer staff members involved, and make sure you donate some or all of the proceeds to a reputable LGBTQIA+ organization. So what is queer beer anyways? I asked the people I interviewed if there was such a thing as queer beer. Some people said definitely not, because once again, beer is for everybody. Others said there was, but that there wasn't one specific style or type. So here's just a few quotes from some of the people I talked to about that. What's the common thread? Queer beer is any beer that is a celebration of difference. It's offering something for everybody and welcoming them as they are, simply because they exist. All right, well, I did that much faster than I did it yesterday. Hopefully you caught all that. And I don't know, if anyone has questions, then I would definitely love to see them. So anyone watching out there, feel free to ask away. I'm gonna assume there's not any right now. Someone has asked, where do you see neurodiversity fitting into the near future? I'm not sure what is meant by neuro. Can that person clarify? Whoever asked the question on Facebook. I'm not clear on what is meant by neurodiversity. Are there any current movements that I am aware of to form a queer brewers group? A lot of the people I talked to in interviews mentioned this and really wanted to start something. I don't know that anything is actively going on right now, but that is honestly one thing I'm kind of hoping can come out of this talk, as well as the article that I'm writing. I think that would be great. I'd love to see that develop for the community. So feel free and start your own if you're out there. Oh, thanks for the clarification. Mental illness, autism spectrum disorder, it's neurodiversity. I mean, I think that's got to be important too. Like, this is the moment, right now, especially to really start, advocating for all underrepresented people, no matter what group they fit into. And I think that all of our communities are only stronger when we come together and collaborate. So a lot of the same, kind of advice that I've given for, advocating for queer people, I think any community can follow those, and that all of us should work together, collaborate, get nonprofit organizations involved, just really let the community itself be kind of driving things forward. Anyone else have questions? Well, if anyone has any last questions, feel free to throw those out there. Otherwise, I'm going to sign off probably in just a minute here. I also want to encourage anyone who wants to know more about this topic, wants to talk about it. If you still want to contribute to the article that I'm working on, you can reach out. Again, take that survey. But feel free to contact me directly. My name's Holly Regan, and my email address, if you want to write fast, is hello@bard, B-A-R-D, creativecontent.com. Or you can always contact the group to try to get a hold of me that way. And I'm on Facebook in the group as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching today. Happy to be able to share about this topic and very honored. Thank you for having me as part of the conference. Thank you to Andrew and Craft Beer Professionals. And yeah, everyone have a great rest of your day. All right, cheers.